Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited to have Ndidi here with us today. I'm going to read her bio and then we're going to jump into the first question. Ndidi is the president and CEO of the One Campaign. She has over 25 years of international development experience and has been deeply involved in fostering impactful solutions in the global social innovation landscape with a focus on Africa. Ndidi started her career at McKinsey and Company's Chicago office and returned to Nigeria in 2000 to serve as the pioneer executive director of the Fate Foundation. She's the founder of Leap Africa, a nonprofit committed to developing dynamic, innovative, and principled African leaders and African food changemakers, which provides support for African entrepreneurs to start and scale resilient and sustainable agribusinesses. She's also the co founder of Sahel Consulting Agriculture and Nutrition Ltd, and AACE Foods Processing and Distribution Ltd. Ndidi serves on the boards of the Rockefeller Foundation, Chanel Foundation, Sandvik IBTC Group, the Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum, and the Bridgespan Group. Ndidi holds an MBA from the Harvard Business School and an undergraduate degree with honors from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. She was a senior fellow at the Mosavar Rahmani Center for Business and Government at the Harvard Kennedy School, a visiting scholar at Maxwell School of Public Policy at McGill University, an Aspen Institute New Voices Fellow, and an Eisenhower Fellow. Ndidi is a TED speaker and has been recognized internationally for her contributions, including as a Schwab Fellow and a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum, and receiving a national honor by the Nigerian government and the Harvard Business School Distinguished Alumni Award. She's also a published author on topics relating to entrepreneurship, social innovation, and resilient agriculture businesses in Africa, including Social Innovation in Africa, a practical guide for scaling impact, and Food Entrepreneurs in Africa, scaling resilient agribusinesses and Walking for God in the Marketplace. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and well done for all you do.
Thank you. So, our first question, just to start it off for our listeners, would you mind sharing what sparked your decision to dedicate much of your career to international development? And perhaps even more fundamentally, how would you define international development for those unfamiliar with the area?
Well, I actually came to the US at 16 to start off finish my high school and start off my college career. And I was faced with a vision of Africa that I didn't recognize. People would tell me, oh, my mom used to say, finish your dinner. They're hungry children in Biafra, or they're hungry children in Somalia, and Ethiopia, or in Africa more broadly. I confronted the single story that the face of Africa was a hungry child, and the face of poverty was a female farmer from the continent. Having grown up in an academic home on a university campus in Enugu, Nigeria, I was shocked that this was the image that people had of my continent. And that really propelled my anger to make a difference, to channel a lot of my business education, my life's goals, to changing the narrative, to creating wealth in Africa, to really demonstrating not only the promise, but also the opportunities on the continent, and to build businesses and social enterprises that not only improved lives, but also showcased what Africa was already contributing to the world. Now, in terms of international development, in the simplest terms, it's basically looking at how to leverage policy tools, investment strategies, partnerships across borders to improve the lives of others. Oftentimes in international development, we get very complicated and we focus just on foreign direct assistance, foreign development assistance, overseas development assistance, and there are a lot of terms we throw around in this industry. But I really believe that anybody can leverage their talents, their time, and their treasure to improve the lives of others. And when it's deployed in a country that's not your own, and when it's focused on mutuality, respect, human dignity, and partnerships, those values are what makes international development so powerful when it's done right, when it's done with the needs of the others in the center of the design, implementation, and ultimately impact. And that's what has motivated me to devote my life to international development and to creating wealth, jobs, equity, and justice on the African continent, but in the world more globally.
I'd like to zoom in on what you said about changing the narrative. One of the many intriguing aspects of your journey is that you pursued your undergraduate studies and MBA in areas traditionally considered to be focused in the private sector, but much of your work and experience has been outside of what people would consider the private sector. Would you mind sharing your thoughts on why you decided to use those degrees as a foundation for a career in international development rather than in the private sector?
Well, I consider myself a serial social entrepreneur. And so entrepreneurship is definitely linked to business. But when you're focused on creating mission driven impact, then it is often considered outside the private sector, because obviously in the private sector, your focus is on shareholder value and creating wealth for your shareholders. In the nonprofit or social enterprise sector, your focus is on impacting the lives of those who you're trying to serve. And I see that as a perfect nexus. The skills that I gained in the business world and in studying business were invaluable to my impact in the nonprofit sector. Because instead of just looking at, balance sheets and uh, revenue growth and profitability and EBITDA and all the terms that we use in the private sector, I have leveraged the same performance-driven mindset to look at lives saved, growth in farmer incomes, improvement in nutritional status. So I think the skills are very transferable. And oftentimes, I think we create a false kind of division between the worlds. And I really believe that the foundation I gained in McKinsey and the consulting background, as well as the foundation I gained at Wharton and Harvard, were instrumental in the trajectory that my career has had. I want to underscore that while at Harvard, actually, the field of social enterprise was just coming of age. And we had just created the Social Enterprise Club. I was one of the founding members. We had also created, there was also a center that was created to honor John Whitehead, who was a very successful Goldman Sachs chairman. And he used to say, you learn, you earn, and then you serve. And I believe you can learn, earn, and serve at the same time. We don't have to wait till we're billionaires or in our 80s or 70s to think about service. And I think that's what we grabbed onto at Harvard is the opportunity to learn, earn, and serve at the same time with the priority of serving as the main driver because we wanted to leave our lives and lives of others better than we found it and leave a legacy of impact.
Jumping off what you said about service, that's a perfect segue into talking about one and one's mission statement. As you know, I've had the honor of working as a One activist since spring of 2021. And at the time, the mission statement focused explicitly on extreme poverty and preventable disease. Recently, though, One has revisited its message and approach to the market, focusing on themes of economic opportunities and healthier lives. What drove this evolution, and what would you want our listeners to take away from this messaging?
First, I want to applaud you for being the youngest volunteer and activist in one's history and for showing that there's never any age that qualifies anybody to speak up with their voice, to lend their passion to causes greater than themselves, and to join movements that change lives. So you are a living example of that, and we applaud you. In terms of the mission, I honestly first applaud the founders and the co-founders of One. This mission was articulated over 21 years ago. By then, we were still thinking 2030, the SDGs, the MDGs, the precursors to the SDGs. And now, it's 21 years, I joined 20 years into the history of One and was saying, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. We've accomplished so much. We've galvanized over $1 trillion for change. We've pushed for debt forgiveness. We've galvanized the creation of PEPFAR, which has saved 26 million lives. I reflected on all of that, but I was very clear that it was time to rethink our mission and vision from the lens of African agency and empowerment. And I could not have the words poverty and disease in the same sentence as Africa because we are so committed to changing that narrative. I really believe what inspires me is not fear, but hope. And I hope, and my desire was to galvanize the next generation and the next group of activists and champions and partners to work alongside us, motivated by the hope and the vision for healthier lives and economic opportunity in Africa. And so we changed our mission to say we fight for the investments to ensure economic opportunity and healthier lives in Africa. And that our vision is that Africa is an equal player and that any child born in Africa has access to abundant resources, healthy lives, and opportunities. And so it is building on the magic, the toolkit, the impact of one, but really saying our focus is on creating these changes, still fighting for equity and justice, which is the foundation of what one does. Public policy advocacy, definitely, but a new lens of hope and faith and a vision for what the future could be. And so that's what excites me. That's what galvanizes me. That's what wakes me up every morning. And I'm so excited that the organization has embraced this new mission and vision and that we co-created it together. It wasn't just me, it was every team member really feeding in and working alongside each other to define what the next 20 years should look like.
One of my fondest memories with the one team actually is we all gathered in the DC office and wrote Valentines to members of Congress for PEPFAR, and then took a picture outside the Capitol. And I'll always remember that, and I have the photo. But jumping off what you said about Africa and the global economy and how Africa fits into all of that, clearly one has a focus on Africa, but there's also a focus on creating sustainable partnerships across all sectors of our economy and society, on the empowerment of people and on advocacy. Could you please share with our audience what your aspiration is for one in 2025 and the years to come with this new lens?
Well, definitely in 2025, we have a very, very clear focus on a few must wins at one. The first one is Gavi, at the Global Vaccine Alliance replenishment, which is actually happening in 2 weeks in Brussels. Gavi is one of the most important agencies that has been committed to saving lives through vaccine access, affordability, innovation. And we've seen the direct impact of Gavi because, under five deaths have been cut in half between the Gavi and the Global Fund, which is the other organization we support. The Global Fund has its replenishment in December. And the Global Fund has been focused on, HIV, AIDS, to TB and malaria, and really leveraging partnerships, innovation, and it just a widespread engagement to really drive change. And these two organizations are so important. And this year we're really focused on ensuring that they achieve the full replenishments, that they generate the resources they need to drive impact, which directly helps us achieve our vision of Africa as an equal player and that healthier lives in Africa are available and abundant across the board. And so for me, that has been really exciting. It's a tough year to have full replenishments, but we're not giving up. We're also very, very committed at one to also thinking through the future of health financing and how African governments must take full accountability of their own health needs and the needs of their most vulnerable people. And so we've articulated a very robust advocacy pathway. And our vision is that hopefully by 2035, many of our countries on the continent will be self-sufficient. And so while we fight for the replenishment, we also believe that gradually accountability, transparency, new taxes generated locally, domestic resource mobilization, galvanizing the diaspora, and also gradually transferring a lot of what is done on the global health space to Africans, that we can actually achieve this vision by 2035. So we're very focused on what we must achieve in 2025, but also working towards that future for sustainable pathways by 2035.
Staying in 2025 for one more second, earlier this spring, Bono wrote, "The bludgeoning of PEPFAR and USAID, one of the most eloquent expressions of American values ever created, might be America's most spectacular act of self-sabotage in generations. U.S. development assistance had its flaws, as its recipients often pointed out, but it was as close to poetry as policy gets." With the dramatic historic restructuring in the US federal government, the decision to both bring USAID into the State Department and dismantle many of its programs, and to reduce aid support in general, as we saw with President Trump's rescission request to Congress, can you put what's happening now into a broader context? What's going on? Why is it going on? And how do you see the international development landscape changing because of these current times?
Well, the first thing I would say is that Bono is one of the most brilliant and articulates people I've been blessed to connect with. And I completely agree with his philosophy and his perspectives. But obviously, he says it best. We are really concerned about the US cuts. And the impact is already being demonstrated on the ground, but also in the US. And that's what people often forget is that international development is not a one-way street, right? It affects people, and the partnerships between countries affect people on both sides of the oceans on which we work. And our lives are more connected than ever. Insecurity is everywhere, threatening stability, conflict, disease, economic collapse, there are food shortages, and our futures are so intertwined. That's why international investments in economic growth and health security and financial reform are so critical. Now, the way that USAID was flattened really has shaken us all, shaken us in DC, shaken manufacturers of life-saving medicines in America, because the pharmaceutical industry was a big piece of that puzzle, right? Has shaken and undermined a lot of the great work that people have essentially put their lives forward for many years. And zeroing on PEPFAR, PEPFAR has been the most successful US intervention in Africa. It is demonstrated not only soft power, but a clear return on investment, right? In terms of 26 million lives saved, in terms of many, many countries moving to self-reliance and sustainability, when PEPFAR was first launched, the cost of treating one HIV/AIDS patient was $10,000. Today, it's less than $40. In fact, the cost of the medicines is minuscule, right? And that's where innovation and partnerships and local ownership matter. And we've seen African governments take on more and more of that responsibility for where the US was contributing over 100% in the beginning to where the US government has contributed in some countries only 20 to 30% of what is required. But how it's been halted has been devastating. And so we at One have not rested, and we are pushing for a full reauthorization of PEPFAR and a full funding of PEPFAR, the multi-year funding, especially because we believe there is a pathway to self-sustainability and that many countries are already demonstrating that pathway. And that is just a few more years of PEPFAR support, and then PEPFAR can be fully retired. I mean, closed down as a success story, right? And so through our One Activist Impact, we've had 88,000 actions directly contacting decision makers. We brought activists to the Hill, about the amazing Power Summit we had in March. 110 of our top advocates, including faith leaders, came into DC, went on the Hill, spoke up. We've also had volunteers in all walks of life. We galvanized faith leaders to write to Congress on PEPFAR. We've had 44 events for Africa Day demonstrating the return on investment. We got people in Africa praying for the US and vice versa. I was joined Africans in Nigeria praying for the US on Africa Day, May 25th, and we had 27 US faith leaders from 24 states also praying for Africa and vice versa. So we haven't rested. We're pushing, we're fighting, we're saying this is not a good move by the current administration. We believe America must do better. America's role in the world is paramount, and PEPFAR must continue, and we will not relent. The same with Gavi and Global Fund. We need to fight for them. So 2025 is so pivotal from a fighting for healthier lives perspective. And if we had to achieve one thing, it would be that the US government and governments across the world, that we're fighting in the UK, we're fighting in Belgium, we're fighting in Italy and the Netherlands, and across the board, Germany and France, we're not giving up because we believe the role of the G7 countries in international development is really important. It has to be smart. It has to be focused on life-saving medicines. We believe there's no time for waste. There's no time for delay, and that a joint commitment to these issues is more important than ever before.
Thank you for sharing that, and kind of branching out the last thing you said of there can be no delay. I wanted to ask you specifically about women's issues. And as you know, the nonprofit Begins With Us has a primary mission of informing, organizing, and empowering young women. And I know you focused often on the importance of empowering and investing in young women in the world, but in Africa especially. What is the relationship between international development and the progress of women? And what is most at stake for women if these aid and development programs are under attack and eventually eliminated?
Yes, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart because women are 50% of our world's population, but unfortunately, in most countries, bear the brunt of leakages in the system, of climate crisis, of conflict. Um, we still see huge disparity in not only financing for women, land ownership for women, women voter rights, access to education, access to growth, and we see women having to almost face the backlash of growth in many countries. And what we are also seeing, even in the US, and I'm sure you're hearing more of this, is a backlash on a lot of the progress we've made on gender equity. I remember an Edelman survey that came out earlier this year, which was released at the World Economic Forum, and I was in a panel with Edelman himself, which really looked at what is causing this backlash. What is it? And the sense that if women are progressing, men are not. And that is for me a falsehood. We have to rise together. Our mothers, our daughters, our sisters are so important to our growth. And the fact that there's the zero-sum game mentality that if women rise, men fall, for me is so destructive and has been used as a lie to keep this inequity persistent and also to even exacerbate inequity in many contexts. And that's why your story, Mena, is so important. The fact that your father is your biggest champion is so powerful. You know, he loves his daughter. He knows his daughter has skills and talents and a voice, and he's providing the support to enable you achieve your highest potential. And oftentimes, when I have the opportunity to talk to men, well, policymakers and decision makers all over the world, I say, how many of you have daughters? And they raise their hand. I said, how many of you would want your daughters' lives to be limited because of somebody's view of their potential or their capacity or a view that they're not enough? How many of you, and none of them raise their hands, then how can you stand back and let the world set policies that prevent progress? McKinsey has some data points that say that it's going to take 153 years for us to achieve gender equity in our world. And none of us are going to be here in 153 years. It is unacceptable. And so from where I sit, I applaud any effort that has a gender lens. And when we talk about gender, it's not just women, it's men and women. And equity is both of us rising together. And that is what we need to continue to reinforce, is that gender rights, gender equity is about all genders rising and all of us achieving our highest potential and a world where everyone can be safe and everyone can achieve parity in terms of income parity, access to resources, access to opportunities. For me, that is where we want to be. And I think changing the language, changing paradigms, changing narratives are more important than ever before. Nobody should be left behind. Men shouldn't be left behind. Women shouldn't be left behind. And so the work we do at a policy level is paramount. At one, gender for us is a cross-cutting theme. You cannot have healthier lives and economic opportunity without both genders benefiting. And as we're designing, we're looking at infant mortality, and that's both genders. We're looking at maternal mortality because women are the ones who carry the babies. And unfortunately, in many contexts where we've made tremendous gains, we're plateauing when it comes to maternal mortality. We're looking at life expectancy, and we need both genders to live up to 80, 90. Why should one gender be dying younger than others, etc.? And with the conflicts, the chaos, the climate, we need to ensure we're protecting both genders and having a gender lens as we design interventions and ensure that the investments we fight for are distributed, accessible to anybody who can benefit as opposed to prioritizing one group over the other. And so I really believe this is paramount, and I'm so glad you focus on it. And I really want you to continue to push this, but from the lens that there's enough space and enough room for all of us to rise together. And we need each other at the table fighting for these causes.
I really appreciate you sharing that. That's a very impactful statement, and also the story of you asking powerful male leaders if they would want their daughters to be in that same position. And I think that's one of the not issues, but I think we need to change the way we view international development and realize that the world is interconnected, not just economically, but socially and politically. And the rights of some people, maybe that we have never met or can't see, do impact us, and their lives matter just as equally. Um, Using that to dive into advocacy, many of our listeners are young people and young women in particular. So, a few questions for them. Many in my generation see what's going on and we want to do something, but it seems unclear where we should focus our energy and time. Regardless of where we live in the US or in the world, what are specific asks and suggestions which you would have for them to get involved?
Well, at one, we really believe that every person's voice counts and that you have the opportunity to leverage your talent, your treasure, and your time to fight for causes that matter. And at one, we actually have so many opportunities for young people to engage on issues that are around equity and justice. Number one, you could write, right, to your elected officials at the state, community level, your mayor, your governor, your president, your congressman, you can write. And we have great tools that we can give you to help you design the letter and to actively provide data and supporting evidence and galvanize and partner with others to write to those who are in positions of authority to explain why they should push for equity and justice. And in our case, Gavi, Global Fund, PEPFAR are must wins, but we also want a stoppage of the cuts. The cuts are overwhelming. The commitment that in the US, less than 1% of US funding, actually US GDP, actually went to international development. In some cases, in some countries, it's 0.3%. Understanding that that is so critical to save lives and we must stop the bleeding and stop the cutting, and using your voice to ask for specific interventions and that your Congress votes for specific interventions is so powerful. So use your written, the way you write letters, the way you send emails, calling those offices. And we have all the tools and skills for you to do that. And you can get information on our website and join and become an activist and join a community all over the world. The second way you can is by actually formally becoming a member of the One Activist community or champions community. In many countries, we have different names. We call some people partners and champions and activists, depending on where you sit in the world. And when you do become an activist like you have, Mayuna, you actually get some training and support, and you join a cohort of other activists. And then guess what? You get to go to events, get to speak up in public places. You get an opportunity to join an activation. If there's an opportunity for us to have, a voice in Congress or a voice on the Hill, a Hill Day is one activation. Or when there are events, when there are peaceful marches, you get the opportunity to join all of those. And we have those events all year round. And our youth ambassadors are so key to those events because they're wearing their one t-shirt, they have passion, they have energy, they're creative, they're coming together. And we say that the power of one is so amazing, one person. But when they gather together, it's even more powerful. And you see a sea of change agents empowering each other, pouring into each other, but you also build lifelong friendships. And it was even funny, one of our activist groups in Germany that I met actually got married to each other. And they're so happy and they share those values. And so seeing those communities of young people just gives me so much joy. But we also have soccer moms and we have faith leaders. So there's no age limit to where you can serve and how you can use your voice. So we invite you to join that effort. The third way that you can actually help beyond writing letters, joining a group of activists, you can also commit your time to causes by serving as a volunteer for many, many causes. And I think young people getting your hands dirty matters. And there are lots of opportunities for service projects in community. There are service projects on the continent. We have matched our youth across continents where they've gotten to do service projects together. That really gives you joy and allows you to see the impact of your work on the ground. And so we would love to see more of that happen. And then I would like to say, Maina, you're taking it even further with your podcast. Podcasts are such a powerful way to reach people. I would love to see more of our young people engage in podcasts. I'd love to see more of our young people actually build out even documentaries, docu-series, Instagram lives, small videos, TikToks, whatever it is that reaches your peer group, because your peer group and influencing your peer group is so powerful. Oftentimes we focus only on the policymakers, but our peer group matters, because one of the things has worried me so much, Mena, is the misinformation in the public domain about how much the US gives to other world regions or how much the UK gives to world regions and why it matters. The misinformation has been such a powerful tool to create dissension, right? To create a backlash on international development. And your generation has an important role to play in correcting that misinformation, putting out the truth, putting out the facts, demonstrating the impact, and helping young people understand that the role of the US, the role of the UK, the role of Germany in the world matters. It's called soft power. It's called partnership. It's called reciprocity. It's called mutual beneficial growth, that we're rising together. And that, guess what? American taxpayers benefit from international development. Manufacturing companies in America benefit from international development. And African companies benefit, so that it's mutually beneficial. And I think if you can do more around attacking that misinformation and providing the truth, that will really create a generation of people who are well informed and who can support international development more broadly.
Stemming off of that, I definitely want to echo that sentiment of misinformation, and hopefully with these discussions and these podcasts, we can help counteract that at least a little bit, in putting out more accurate messaging. Given, as we've talked about, women's issues and the highly fraught times which we're living in, this last question is kind of our advice column of the podcast that I've loved to ask our guests. So I love to ask you about your advice for young people and young women in particular, if they're considering pursuing careers in some aspect of public service and social justice, whether it's a NGO or an advocacy organization like the One Campaign, politics, or another related field. What would your piece of advice be to these young people?
I would say, first of all, congratulations on even your interest in this. I'm so proud of you. I think there are three things you must do early in life. The first one is find three people: a critic, a champion, and a mentor. I think it's really important, and it was advice I got early in life, that having champions, having mentors, having critics are really helpful, because this is often a lonely journey, and there are not many people like you, Mena, and like some of the young people who have decided to do this. And having a community of support walk alongside you in this journey is critical. Finding one or two people who have lived this pathway, who you can follow, is a gift. And so that's critical. The second is, do get internships. And I think internships are so powerful. I had internships from a very young age, and it helped me understand what aspects of development I most gravitated towards, what I loved. And you can see in my early life, I spent a lot of time in the food industry. I found that I loved addressing malnutrition and creating jobs and helping improve the nutritional status of our people. And, that was a joy, but I wouldn't have known that I loved this so much if I hadn't spent time in that sector, right? And so find the area of international development. Is it maternal health? Is it public health? Is it justice and equity? Is it the legal defense? There's so many areas. So internships, broad-based internships, tailored internships, as many internships as possible is great. Then the third is really delving into a study of this area. If you do want to get your first or second degree in this area, that's a gift that you can give yourself. And then finding the right early jobs. I found that consulting was a very good entry point for me, but for many other people, it's a different sector where then you get to tip your foot in the water. And then you start your own nonprofit. Some people start nonprofits much earlier. Mena, you've started one. My daughter started one at 14. Oftentimes I say it's great to have a nonprofit at a young age, but it's also good to get some work experience, because it helps you strengthen your nonprofit. It also helps you build out your nonprofit and figure out what the scaling strategy is for your nonprofit. And galvanizing others to join your effort makes it even more impactful. And so that's something to think about. And then for your nonprofit, for those who have already started, wonderful. Make sure you have a strong board that holds you accountable, that helps you with fundraising, helps you drive impact. A board, not just of family members. I always say it's good to have a lawyer, an accountant, subject matter expert. Surround yourself with strong people. And ultimately, make time to rest. Invest in rest, invest in sustaining the soul that serves so that you don't get burnt out and too tired at a young age. I found that I was really working really hard and never had any breaks and really passionate and committed. But if you don't rest and don't balance your life, then you burn out. And it's so important that you pace yourself. The world is your oyster. Pace yourself. There's no rush. You can achieve all of this in your lifetime, not all at the same time, but in your lifetime. So pace yourself, be kind to yourself, and realize that you're special, you're gifted, you're a gift to our world. And we applaud you, we celebrate you, and we're here to champion your efforts. So well done.
Ndidi, thank you so much for everything you've shared with us today. Career advice and life advice, perspective advice. I really, really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. It's been wonderful engaging with you, and I'm so proud of all that you do. I'm rooting for you to succeed, and you can always count on one support. We need more people like you, with one, standing by us and being part of the movement. So keep it up.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.